After our spoken prayer and a time of silence, we will sing together Spirit of Life, hymn number 123, which is also printed in your order of service. We'll sing first in English and then in Spanish. For hands calloused and rough, I pray. For backs aching at end of day, for those who toil in the fields and those whose struggles rarely yield, for each motion on the factory line repeated daily 1,000 times, for those that work along the road where thoughtless of them I safely drove, for each can of trash so deftly heft from side of road that I had left without a thought of who receives the heavy burdens that I leave. For each strained muscle and bead of sweat of farm hands I have never met, for those who knead and shape the loaves and those who sew and make the clothes, for each action that I didn't see behind the gifts that come to me, I pause to honor those seldom viewed and offer up deep gratitude. She's writing in Los Angeles. Their faces are vague, the color of coffee beans. But before Ramiro Gomez heads out with pliers and wire to install them, he gives each one a name. There was Guillermina for his aunt, a housekeeper at a casino hotel. Maria Elena after his mom, a janitor at an elementary school. And Luis, like Uncle Luis, who delivers meat. For the past 8 months, Gomez, an artist from West Hollywood, has made the invisible visible by installing life-size cardboard cutouts of nannies, gardeners, valet workers, and housekeepers in Beverly Hills. His acrylic paintings appear unexpectedly around the West Side, like pop-ups from a children's book. Gomez puts them on display to raise provocative questions. We see the beautiful homes. The hedges are trimmed, the gardens are perfect, the children are cared for, Gomez said. We've come to expect it to be this way. But who maintains all this? Who looks after it? And do we treat the workers with the dignity they deserve? Do we stop and notice them? Often, people zoom right by Gomez's creations, so he puts them in places that get plenty of foot traffic, busy intersections, parking lots, and parks. Recently, he tried his luck outside the Beverly Hills Hotel. He propped up a housekeeper named Anna against a hedge near the entrance. She stood facing forward, clutching her purse with both hands. Within a day, she had been removed by hotel staff. When President Obama came to town for a fundraiser at George Clooney's home in Studio City, Gomez installed 4 gardeners wielding a giant water hose a few blocks away. He was soon ordered to remove them by the Secret Service. Most pieces last a day or two, if Gomez is lucky. Once, a valet parker he planted outside a lot near the Sunset Strip made it 4 days. Gomez writes his contact information on the back of each piece so people can tell him where the art ended up. So far, no one has contacted him. At first, it was tough to let go. He'd stand by for a while to see people's reactions and then lug the cutout home. But he realized it was not his place to keep public art out of view, so he learned to walk away. These days, he goes to a Best Buy store every Monday in search of cardboard. He sifts through the garbage bin for TV boxes. The 70-inchers allow his laborers to stand at least 5 feet tall. He hauls the boxes home to the 2-bedroom apartment he shares with his partner. In a bedroom that doubles as his studio, his Juanitas, Adolfos, and calendarios quietly come to life. On a recent morning, he put the final touches on a piece he's had in mind for a while, a nanny. He himself has been working as a nanny to support his art habit. He gave her a pink shirt, black pants, and a state-of-the-art stroller. He named her Sylvia, after an aunt. He planned to install Sylvia at West Hollywood Park, where the nannies gather. The moment Gomez showed up, the women watched him. Maria Teresa Martinez, a nanny he didn't know, came over with her charge, a blonde, curly-haired boy named Charlie. She took a look, threw back her head, and laughed. She was wearing a pink shirt and black pants. "Will you look at that?" she said. At 63, the Salvadoran has worked as a nanny for 30 years. She was helping raise Charlie now, and years before, she had helped to raise Charlie's mom. The family was good, she said, and she was lucky. Looking up and down at the cutout, she let out a long sigh. "This is good," she said. "We have so many stories to tell, so many. We could write a book." Thank you. What a perfect song for today. This week we celebrated May Day, the 1st of May, a holiday of sorts that can be celebrated in 2 different fashions. On the one hand, it is a seasonal celebration, an ancient pagan ritual of springtime. There are maypoles and flower crowns and joyous, carefree dancing. And on the other hand, it is a more sober occasion devoted to the laborers and the workers around the world, an International Workers' Day. This occasion calls for strikes and boycotts, recognition of the achievements of the labor movement. It's similar to Labor Day here in the United States, which we celebrate in the fall. May 1st was chosen to be International Workers' Day to commemorate the 1886 Haymarket Affair in Chicago. In that year, beginning on the 1st of May, there was a general strike fighting for the 8-hour workday. On May 4th, the police acted to disperse a public assembly in support of the strike when someone, we don't know who, threw a bomb. The police responded by firing on the workers. The subsequent riot led to the death of 8 police officers and many civilians. Hundreds of labor leaders and sympathizers were later rounded up, and 4 were executed after a trial that was widely seen as a miscarriage of justice. In 1955, the Catholic Church dedicated May 1st to Saint Joseph the Worker, patron saint of workers and craftsmen. I was thinking this week that those who are the least paid in this country and those who are least respected and least protected are actually the ones that do the most important jobs. I mean, you could get through your week okay without a minister. It would be terrible, I know. But I think you'd make it through all right. But you would never make it through your week without the farmers and the factory workers and sanitation workers that keep us fed, clothed, clean, and healthy. Why is it that we respect these jobs so little? Why is it that we feel so unrelated to the person sweeping the floors at the hospital we are admitted to? Or that we don't say hello and thank you to the people doing the dishes as we walk past the restaurant kitchen? Why is it that we never wonder who made our clothes or who picked our strawberries? Who picks up our trash, or who put together our cell phones? Now, I don't want to make the mistake that many Unitarians make and speak about workers and laborers like I'm not preaching to a room full of workers and laborers. That's the kind of stuff that perpetuates classism and obnoxious elitism within Unitarian Universalism. Even though we have many retired people in our congregation, I bet there are many of you whose backs are aching this morning from your week at work. Many of you have quite physical jobs. Some of you have been landscaping and oystering, cleaning houses and doing construction projects. And some of you are teachers and town employees. You are therapists and yoga teachers, realtors and tax professionals. You work at Stop and Shop and Outer Cape Health and local retail shops. You work at the Chamber of Commerce and in restaurants as personal care assistants. We have a judge and we have a chimney sweep in our midst. We are a wonderful mix of professions here, as well as those who are now resting from their labors in retirement. And in fact, I have heard from many members and friends who've let me know that they can't be here this morning because the season has started, and they are now working on Sundays. And some of our folks are also on disability and can't work because of injuries, illnesses, and chronic conditions. I also think we are a little unique here in Provincetown in that so many of us cobble together our livings so that we end up getting to know people that we otherwise never would. A professor might also be a waitress. A cab driver might have a PhD. An artist might clean houses on the weekends. But still, we are not immune to seeing ourselves as separate from people whose labor we do not see. Even here on the beautiful Outer Cape, we have an unseen class of workforce that go ignored and underpaid, exploited even. And we wear and eat and use products made by an unseen workforce. And we don't constantly clamor for justice. We get used to it. We have grown accustomed to enormous gaps in wealth. We like low prices and cheap goods. Today, America's 1% makes over 198 times the income of the bottom 99%. While in 1968, a person making a federal minimum wage could have supported a family of 3, now a single parent with 1 child working full-time, 40 hours a week and 52 weeks a year with no vacation, lives below the poverty line. Teachers who used to hold such a respected position in our country now have to strike to get fair wages. They work second jobs after school and during the summer. Some are on food stamps. We've been seeing their stories in the news. We really can't get used to this as normal. It isn't. We need to get more squarely on the side of the worker, no matter what our financial situation or profession is. Catholic activist Dorothy Day once said, "What we would like to do is change the world. Make it a little simpler for people to feed, clothe, and shelter themselves. By fighting for better conditions, by crying out unceasingly for the rights of the workers, the poor, the destitute. We can," she said, "to a certain extent, change the world. We can work for the oasis, the little cell of joy and peace in a harried world. We can throw our pebble in the pond and be confident that its ever-widening circle will reach around the world." I'm not sure if we'll ever live into Dorothy's image of an oasis, a cell of joy and peace, but I know we can do better. And one step in the direction of better is educating ourselves about current labor initiatives. and another is to get inspired by labor activists of the past and the present. I recently read a book that chronicled the struggle of a group of workers in the 1920s. But before I tell you about it, allow me to get sidetracked for just a moment in my appreciation for small local bookstores. Having read about the book in the New York Times Book Review and heard about a play based on the book from a friend, I went next door to the Provincetown bookshop and said to Clayton behind the counter, "I'm going to give you an incredibly unhelpful description of a book, and I hope that you can find it for me." "Oh," he said, "I love this game." "It's called something Girls," I said, "and it has to do with some kind of science element." "Ah," he said, "I can't remember the name of it either, but we have it, and it has green on the cover, and it's right over there." And 2 seconds later, he handed me the book that I have been reading for the last 2 weeks, Radium Girls by Kate Moore. Here's a little synopsis of the story. A century ago, glow-in-the-dark watches were an irresistible novelty. The dials, covered in a special luminous paint, shone all the time and didn't require charging in sunlight. It looked like magic. One of the first factories to produce these watches was in New Jersey, opened in 1916. It hired about 70 women, the first of thousands to be employed in many such factories in the United States as dial painters. For the delicate task of applying the paint to the tiny dials, the women were instructed to point the brushes with their lips. It was the best way to get a fine point on their brushes, to paint on numbers as small as a single millimeter in width. The glowing dials quickly became indispensable to the military, who used them on gun sights and ships' compasses. But the paint made the watches glow because it contained radium, a radioactive element discovered less than 20 years earlier, its properties not yet fully understood. And the women were ingesting it with nearly every brushstroke. They became known as the Radium Girls. Being a dial painter was a well-paid, glamorous job for young women in those days, and they were the envy of the town. By the end of the workday, the girls were covered in luminous dust particles so that when they walked home at night, they literally glowed in the dark. Sometimes they wore their best dresses to the plant so that when they'd go out in the speakeasies after work, they would shimmer and shine. In the early 1920s, though, some of the Radium Girls started developing symptoms like fatigue and toothaches. Their bones began to disintegrate. They were young and should be healthy. They didn't understand what was happening, and neither did the doctors and the dentists that they were seeing week after week. In 1922, Molly Magia was the first to die. Then more girls started getting ill. But still the factory owners instructed the girls to dip their brushes into the luminous paint and then to point the brushes in their mouths. They let the girls eat their lunches in the studios, and they told them to pick at the dried paint with their fingernails. It couldn't possibly be the radium making them sick, they said. Besides, business was booming. If a girl developed too bad of a limp and started attracting attention, they would fire her. Behind the scenes, the companies tested the girls for radium poisoning and didn't like the results, but they hid them from the girls. Dial painting continued. The young women in their employ were disposable to companies like Radium Dial and the United States Radium Corporation. In the face of profit, people were inconsequential. In 1925, Grace Fryer, one of the workers from the original New Jersey plant, decided to sue. But she would spend 2 years searching for a lawyer willing to help her. No one wanted to go up against the deep-pocketed companies. She finally filed her case in 1927, along with 4 fellow workers, and made front-page news around the world. The case, settled in the women's favor in 1928, became a milestone of occupational hazard law. It and several lawsuits that came later from women at a plant in Illinois led to the establishment of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which now works nationally in the United States to ensure safe working conditions across industries. Radium paint itself was eventually phased out and has not been used in watches since 1968. It's hard to calculate how many women suffered health problems and excruciating pain due to the ingestion of radium, but they certainly number in the thousands. The legacy of the Radium Girls lives on through the ripples that their deaths created in labor laws and our scientific understandings of the effects of radioactivity. In the 1950s, during the Cold War, many of the surviving dial painters agreed to be studied by scientists so that their bodies could serve as warnings against nuclear testing. In 1963, at least partly in response to the research on the Radium Girls, President Kennedy signed the International Limited Test Ban Treaty, which limited atomic testing. Reading Kate Moore's book, I fell in love with each of the Radium Girls as I learned her story. Their plight became my plight. Their frustration, my frustration. They were buoyed by their friendships, loved by their husbands, missed by their children. They became real to me. May Day, International Workers' Day, is a day for all workers around the world to become real to us. Each human being in this world, no matter their occupation, is a person with friendships and family, hopes and dreams, joys and concerns just as deep as our own. May we continue to seek out stories and relationships that remind us of the inherent worth and dignity of every person as part of our spiritual growth. May we be better at seeing, really seeing, those around us. May we be grateful for all the unseen hands that have shaped our day before we even get out of bed. May we side with labor movements and people over low prices and convenience. May we continue to strive for that better world that Dorothy Day dreamed of. And may we pause in deep gratitude for the good and hard work that we are called to do in the world. Amen, and blessed be.